A wildfire tore through Jerusalem, forcing people to flee for their lives as smoke turned the sky black. How did it spread so fast? Was it an accident or something more dangerous? Over 10,000 people had to evacuate, homes and forests were destroyed, and the air became toxic. With heat waves and dry land fueling the flames, how long until this happens again? The fear is real. This disaster could be just the beginning. On April 30th, 2025, a terrifying disaster struck Israel, and it didn't take long for it to turn into a nightmare for everyone. Highway 1, which connects Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, was suddenly consumed by flames, and what followed felt like something out of a horror movie. It wasn't just a little flare, it was a massive inferno, burning everything in its path and spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. The fire came so quickly that drivers didn't have time to think. They had to ditch their cars and run, gasping for air as thick smoke turned the sky black. People were caught in a panic, not knowing where to go or if they would make it out alive. What's more horrifying is how close this fire was to urban areas. It didn't start in a faraway forest, it began just outside Jerusalem. Within hours, it had spread over 17 square kilometers, burning down forests, farmland, and valuable natural areas. It wasn't just a fire, it was a massive disaster, and no one was prepared. Over 10,000 people from villages like Beit Mir and Sheish were forced to flee, many of them without much more than the clothes on their backs. The panic was real, families ran for their lives while the fire kept coming, spreading uncontrollably. It wasn't just the people who had to escape, even the Itanim Psychiatric Hospital had to evacuate patients, some of whom went missing during the chaos. Can you imagine what must that have felt like, trying to find everyone in the middle of all that terror? Emergency services were overwhelmed. With smoke so thick, it was nearly impossible to see anything and visibility dropped to near zero in some areas. It wasn't just about escaping the fire, the air had turned toxic. People had to deal with smoke so heavy, it made breathing almost impossible, especially for the elderly and kids. The air quality plummeted, with levels of dangerous particles reaching 10 times higher than what is safe. Hospitals saw a huge rise in people coming in with breathing problems, and it didn't stop there. The fire didn't just disrupt the normal life of people, it was a wake-up call. A terrible sign of things to come. The fire wasn't just an accident, it was caused by human activity, and that makes it even scarier. Was it a cigarette carelessly thrown away or something worse like arson? Authorities don't know for sure yet, and that uncertainty just makes people more anxious. But it's not just the fire that's horrifying and worrying, it's the fact that this is becoming a pattern. For years, Israel has been facing hotter temperatures and drier conditions. Late April in 2025 was no exception. The heat was unbearable, with temperatures soaring past 38 degrees Celsius in some places, much higher than usual. Combine that with winds blowing at over 50 kilometers an hour, and it's no surprise that the fire spread like a wildfire. Literally. But what makes this even worse is the dry, overgrown vegetation. Years of poor land management have left the land in a condition where a small spark can turn into a massive blaze. This fire is a wake-up call about how we need to take climate change seriously, said Tamar Zandberg, Israel's environmental protection minister. And she's right, the country's fire season is no longer just a summer problem, it's becoming an all-year-round disaster. What's even more worrying is that this fire is part of a larger trend. Experts say that Israel has seen a 30% increase in wildfires over the last 15 years. Fires that used to be rare are now becoming a frightening reality. Just think about the Mount Carmel fire in 2010, which killed 44 people and burned 25 square kilometers of land. It used to be seen as something that would only happen once in a lifetime, but now it looks more like a preview of what's to come. The most disturbing part of all this is how vulnerable we've become. Fires like this don't just destroy homes, they destroy lives. Over 1,500 households were affected, with families losing everything. Some of them are still in shelters, unsure if they will ever be able to return home. And while the authorities have been working to provide food, water, and blankets, it's clear that the real problem is much bigger than just this one fire. International help came, but not everyone answered the call. Italy and Croatia quickly sent planes. They saved lives, no question about it, said a local mayor, but Greece and Cyprus said no. They claimed they were stretched too thin after their own fire emergencies earlier in the summer. Bulgaria was also asked to help but didn't send anything. No one really knows why. "We asked, we begged, and we waited, but they never came," said a senior official. The silence from some of these countries has sparked questions about regional cooperation when disaster strikes. Back on the ground, the conditions were terrifying. The Jerusalem hills are steep and hard to reach with big trucks. Narrow roads meant crews couldn't get to some areas in time. You'd turn a corner and suddenly be surrounded by fire, one rescuer said. Winds kept changing direction, trapping crews and sending embers flying into new neighborhoods. At least 20 firefighters ended up in hospital with smoke-related injuries. "We thought we were going to die," admitted one young crew member. Paramedics and emergency responders were overwhelmed too. Roads were clogged with cars as panicked residents fled. Magen David Adom, Israel's National Emergency Service, sent 50 ambulances and 200 medics, but call centers couldn't keep up. "There were so many calls, the phones wouldn't stop ringing," said a dispatch operator. Over 20 people were treated for burns and smoke problems, many of them kids and the elderly. A hospital in Jerusalem has said their ER was packed, triple the usual number of patients, most struggling to breathe. The fire didn't just burn homes, it tore through forests that had stood for hundreds of years. The green, peaceful hills that people once hiked and picnicked in are now blackened skeletons. The famous Sadaf Forest and Ain Hamid Park were heavily damaged. These aren't just pretty places, they help protect the soil, keep water in the ground, and support hundreds of plants and animal species. "The fire has turned our lungs into ashes," said one environmental activist. Over 80% of the area's plant and animal life was destroyed, including rare trees like the Jerusalem pine and animals like foxes and birds of prey. "There's nothing left," a park ranger whispered. That destruction could lead to serious long-term problems. With no trees to hold the ground in place, landslides and erosion could happen when the rains come. Experts also say that underground water levels could drop by 15%, hitting an already drought-stricken region even harder. Farmers in the area lost everything. Vineyards, olive trees, and orchards that had taken decades to grow. All gone in one night, said a farmer near Ramat Razil. The damage is in the millions, and these were not big corporations, these were family farms. And the air? It was thick, black, and deadly. Smoke blanketed Jerusalem like a poisonous fog. The pollution level hit 400 on the Air Quality Index. That's in the hazardous category. Schools shut down, people stayed indoors, windows sealed. "I couldn't breathe, my chest hurt just walking to the mailbox," one resident wrote online. Children and seniors were most at risk. Doctors say the long-term effects of this kind of air can show up years later, heart problems, lung disease, and more. At least 20 homes are completely gone. Families came back to find only ashes and metal frames where their lives used to be. In Ramat Razil, entire blocks were wiped out. Shops, cafes, small farms, all destroyed. "We have nowhere to go. This was our whole life," said a mother with 2 young kids. The financial cost is still being counted, but early reports say that it's over 100 million shekels, or about $30 million. That doesn't even include the lost businesses, roads, and power lines that melted in the heat. Psychologically, this fire left deep scars. Families are still in temporary shelters, children are waking up screaming, "We're seeing serious trauma, especially in kids," said one volunteer counselor. The staff at Eitanim Psychiatric Hospital had to evacuate during the chaos. Some patients still haven't recovered. The stress, the fear, it's hard to explain unless you were there. The government moved quickly, offering about $21 million in emergency aid to cover food, shelter, and urgent needs. But it's not nearly enough. Rebuilding homes and healing minds will take much more. Insurance companies are warning that payouts could take months. "People are desperate," said a social worker. "They don't just need money, they need hope." Volunteers have been heroes in all of this, showing up with water, food, diapers, and even toys for the kids. But even with all this goodwill, the disaster revealed some serious problems in Israel's emergency systems. "We weren't ready for something this big," said one firefighter, "and next time, it could be even worse." Something about the fire didn't sit right from the beginning. People had questions, too many for comfort, and then when Israel's fire commissioner Didi Shimshi publicly said it was definitely human-caused, it only made the fear worse. What exactly does that mean? Did someone forget to put out a campfire, drop a cigarette and dry brush? Or far worse, did someone do it on purpose? The idea of arson is not just a far-off suspicion. In 2016, Israel faced a wave of wildfires linked to arson attacks, and several people were arrested at that time. So now, in 2025, the concern is real. What if it was planned? What if someone wanted this to happen, asked a shopkeeper in a burned-out village nearby? Authorities have not named any suspects, and no arrests have been made yet, but the silence is making things worse. Social media has exploded with theories. Some think it was politically motivated, others suspect revenge. A few believe it was just a terrible accident in a country that's becoming hotter and drier every year. But the truth? Nobody knows for sure, and that's what's driving people crazy. Investigators are working around the clock. They're analyzing satellite footage, talking to witnesses, and going through whatever is left off the scene. But fires eat evidence fast. Once something burns, it doesn't leave much behind. It's like trying to find clues in a pile of dust. We're doing everything we can, but it's not easy, one investigator told reporters. And if arson is proven, the fallout could be huge, especially in a place where security fears are already high. As the fire was finally brought under control after several exhausting days, the real horror started to sink in. Thousands of acres are gone, dead forests, burned animals, crushed families. Over 5,000 hectares were destroyed, a number so big it's hard to picture. The famous Jerusalem hills, once green and peaceful, now look like a battlefield. Restoring those forests isn't something that can be done in a year or two. Experts say it could take up to 40 years to fully recover. Even with fast-growing species, the area's ecosystem has been torn apart. Native plants like the Jerusalem pine and endangered flowers are at risk of disappearing completely. And worse, invasive weeds and foreign plants could take over, making the problem harder to fix. It's like starting from zero, said a volunteer working with an environmental group. The Israeli government has promised support, but the funding isn't close to what's needed. Environmental groups are asking for at least $50 million just for the forest restoration alone. Right now, only a small portion of that is on the table. The fire also left behind dangerous soil erosion, especially on steep slopes. Without trees to hold the soil, heavy rains this winter could lead to mudslides, road damage, and water contamination. People who lost their homes are still in shock. Over 30 homes were completely destroyed and hundreds more damaged. Insurance companies say it could take months before claims are processed, and that means families are stuck in small shelters or crowded hotels. Many have started saying they may not return. How can I raise my kids here now? Everything's gone, said a father of 3 whose home turned to ash. For small communities in the hills, this fire might be the thing that finally drives people away. What really caused the fire? Could it have been prevented? And if it was set on purpose, who did it and why? Do let us know in the comment section below, and for more such amazing videos, do subscribe to our channel.